Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Pathways Workshop Series. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Dr. George Neild. I'm currently serving as the chairman of the Global Spaceport Alliance, and we are organizing these sessions in collaboration with Spaceport America and with sponsorship by Jacobs. The Global Spaceport Alliance, or GSA, was established in 2015 with the goal of creating a global network of current and proposed spaceports that can serve as focal points and technology hubs to facilitate growth of the space economy and to provide ready access to space. Now, the key to achieving that goal is based on our belief that spaceports are not just places from which the launches occur, but rather they can be part of an overall ecosystem that can include things like aerospace manufacturing, scientific research, technology development, education and training, workforce development, and in the not too distant future, even point-to-point transportation through space, which we think will be a huge game changer. GSA currently has 26 member spaceports from 9 different countries all over the world. We also have 15 associate members, companies that are providing products and services to the spaceports, as well as 11 government agencies, nonprofits, and academic institutions. Starting today, we're actually creating a new category of membership for students and would encourage you to consider joining. We've got information on the application form that is in the chat box. And if you'd like more information about GSA, feel free to check out the website, globalspaceportalliance.com, or reach out directly to James Causey or Steve Wolf, our Executive Director and Deputy Executive Director. At this point, I'd like to introduce Alice Carruth, who is the Public Information Officer for Spaceport America, and she also serves as GSA's chair of our working group on academic partnerships. She is also the person who first thought of the idea of having the Pathways Workshop Series. So thanks so much for all your efforts in pulling this together, Alice.
Thank you, George. So I am the Public Information Officer for Spaceport America, but also serve on the chair of this incredible group of spaceports from around the world that are all working together to try and support the future workforce in aerospace. So we created this series to try and help you come and join us in the aerospace industry. And please note that it's coming up every other Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern time zone. So make sure that you put it on your calendar and join us on a weekly basis, although we will be making the recordings available to you. The first in the series is Astropreneurship, which is entrepreneurship in aerospace. And I'm very excited to be introducing our guest speaker, Stefan Recke, who is the Executive Director of the Global Entrepreneur Network, GenSpace, and a universal network of ecosystems for astropreneurs. Stefan co-founded Anglius Funding, a trust-based global angel network investing in innovative and impactful opportunities, and is a member of the Global Business Angels Network. Stefan is a co-founding partner at Edge of Space, which provides STEAM access to space. As the CEO of a nonprofit, Transform Poverty Global, he is focused on addressing global poverty and climate change. He is a second-generation Armenian Russian and a true native New Yorker, fluent in 5 languages. Stefan enjoys traveling the world, having flown over 8 million miles, the equivalent of 16 moon missions. Stefan, I'd love you to start your presentation.
And actually, Stefan, before you start, why don't we just say a little bit about the Spaceport America Cup and see if we can make sure people are ready for that.
Yes, we started this series really focused on the group of participants for the Spaceport America Cup, which is the world's largest intercollegiate rocket engineering competition. The Spaceport America Cup runs every June here at Spaceport America in New Mexico. We have over 24 countries participating from 6 different continents in 2023. So really, we wanted to be able to establish a relationship between students and spaceports. Spaceport America has grown with a really great opportunity to work with our local spaceports in the region. And we hope that all the students that participate can continue with that relationship building and talk to spaceports around the world. So really use this workshop series to start building relationships, to start networking, and start thinking about your future careers in aerospace. And on that note, Stefan, please do talk to us about astropreneurship.
Great. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, George. It's exciting to be part of this Pathway to the Stars webinar series. I'm going to be talking about Gen Space, and before I do, I'd like to introduce my guest panelist, Shea Johnson. He's actually zooming in from Nigeria. Shea, would you like to quickly introduce yourself and say a couple of words, please?
Hi, thanks, Stefan, and thanks for having me on this platform. So I'm Shea Johnson. I'm an ecosystem builder. And for the last couple of years, I've really been focused or invested in the bold application of space technologies in emerging markets, such as Africa, to sort of foster greater participation within the global space innovation and commercial conversation, right? So I'm really looking to catalyze technology, innovation-driven leadership across these markets through the application of near-term or market-ready deep technologies. And one of these is space. More recently, I've been focused on scaling space startups across Africa and Europe, working closely with accelerators such as the European Institute of Innovation and Sustainability, as well as the Africa Earth Observation Challenge. As part of as regional partner at the Africa Technology Foundation, a Silicon Valley-based organization, we work very closely with organizations across the world, as well as the U.S. State Department, across different industries and sectors, and one of this was space. I'm also a frequent technology speaker, guest lecturer at the International Space University's Space Studies Program, Global Entrepreneurship Congress, and the Google Launchpad. So really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Shea. And as we talk more about Gen Space, if any of you dying in or have interest in Africa, please do reach out to Shea and also myself. Our goal is to promote the access to space in a very collaborative way. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides, and then we'll go through some panel discussions, and we want to be able to address your questions. So the big opportunity here in space is that it's getting easier. Access to space is getting cheaper through reusable and modular architectures, and the space agencies are really taking a look at how can they commercialize their approach to space. ESA is doing a great job at putting together a huge network of business incubation centers. NASA is looking at commercialization opportunities. They're looking at providing access to their IP that they've developed. And the big data from space, Earth observation data, is getting either free or either cheaper access to that. An example of that is the European Space Agency Copernicus Masters Challenge, where you can actually participate in kind of a hackathon to get access to space data. So to kind of level set here about what is an astropreneur, essentially, let me start with an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is a person that organizes and operates a business, and typically that business has more than normal financial risks. So it's a risky business, and essentially they typically would be starting a business based on something that they're passionate about. The idea, from my perspective, it's not an idea generation exercise, it's a business generation exercise. So entrepreneurs have to be able to justify putting a business around their idea. And an astropreneur is exactly an entrepreneur, either focused on doing business in space or putting together some type of a space-based product. So what does it take to be an astropreneur? You have to be creative. It's important to not just be creative, but to leverage whether existing innovation or be innovative. You have to be able to think out of the box and come up with the newest and, I feel, the best solution to a challenge out there that's created by space. You have to be able to address risks and be resilient. It's not easy to be an astropreneur or an entrepreneur, so you have to be able to either take the risks as they come or put together a really strong plan on how to mitigate those risks. And then, as I mentioned, it's about businesses. So you have to have a strong business sense. If you don't have a strong business sense, you have to have a co-founder or a partner that understands business, because being an entrepreneur, an entrepreneur is around putting a business together successfully. So there's sales, there's marketing, there's business principles, finances. So it's really important to be either part of a team or put the team together to make that work. This is a sample slide of a bunch of different markets that you can address doing business in space, starting from Earth observation to putting together apps to manipulate the data from Earth observation, looking at either putting together a launcher technology or some type of a satellite technology. The costs are just being driven down and the sizes are being driven down, so it's easier and quicker to do rapid prototype development in the satellite business. Managing data, whether it's in space or from space down to Earth, and the data analytics, massaging the information. There's been a big push for commercial space stations to be developed in addition to what we have currently in the International Space Station. A lot of really amazing opportunities there for deep space exploration, as well as more advanced scientific research. Orbital infrastructures, essentially putting together the infrastructure required to have technology communicate in orbit. And that also includes orbital debris, which you've probably heard a lot about, the fact that things are floating around in space that can damage spacecraft and potentially the Earth. In situ resource utilization, essentially the ability to leverage resources where you are. So as we land on the moon or different planets, to take a look at what resources are available and use those resources to do either building material or maybe potentially fueling. So it's really important for survival and for deeper space exploration. There's been a push, and you've all probably heard about the space tourism that's going on and the commercial astronaut programs that have started, like SpaceX and Blue Origin. There's also a big push for media and leveraging entertainment to give access to space to the average person, the average citizen of the Earth. And then again, the science and research that's available from space. So today, on a daily basis, space, your life is touching space, whether you're using an infrared ear thermometer that was developed in space or memory foam in your mattress. If you go to a doctor's office and get CAT scans or radiography, a lot of that technology is a derivative of what happened because of space. Freeze-dried foods, baby formula, different ways of processing waste on Earth. Lots of electronics came as a derivative of things in space, whether it's digital image processing, wireless headsets, camera phones, even computer mouse, and then infrastructure. So on a hourly basis, if not more regular, using your GPS to get around, using networks based on satellites to communicate, as well as the ability to detect and model weather. So each of the above, this is just a sample. It's called spinoffs, and NASA does a great job at publishing spinoffs on their website, but this has changed the way we live on the world. So what we want to focus on and emphasize at GenSpace is that you no longer have to be the traditional rocket scientist to do work in space. All types of careers are going to be made available as we do deep space settlement, exploration. There's lawyers and doctors and teachers and artists, as well as people that want to put together policies for how we survive in space. All those career opportunities are being either formed or will be developed pretty quickly. From space, when you look at the Earth, you really don't see particular restrictions in market segments, but you have the ability and the opportunity to see the global economy as a single market. Kind of like think about it as an extension of the World Wide Web, but truly from space, you really have access and can see the world. You also, in space, have what's considered to be limitless access to resources. So you have the ability to leverage the resources available to you from space. ideally without wars or ecological constraints or any type of ownership claims still. And then the important thing that we want to stress and why we pull together Gen Space is because there are no borders in space. To be successful in space, we need to be cooperative or collaborative. It's okay to be competitive, but the importance of collaboration is key if you want to be successful in space. Because as, for example, the International Space Station does an orbit of the planet in 90 minutes. So within those 90 minutes, you're able to see the big portion of the Earth. And if you're thinking of just doing business in one location in the Earth, you don't have that restriction anymore because you're doing business from space. The UN has put together the Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of them. The cool part about space is we feel that strongly that you can address all aspects of these SDGs by doing some type of a business in space. Just real quick about the Global Entrepreneurship Network. We are in 200 countries where we're mapping out the ecosystems for entrepreneurship, and we have several types of offerings, whether it's an acceleration program, the ability to talk about how do you do investments across these different countries, and how do you start businesses. The thing I just came back from, I was just at the Entrepreneurs World Cup in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia last week, where 40,000 companies applied globally over the course of the past two quarters, and we were able to select the top 100, and I was participating as a judge to select from the top 100 the top 10 finalists. The exciting thing about this year's Entrepreneurs World Cup is for the first time we're able to introduce space as a location, and we actually had a dozen space companies apply in this world competition. So the three key pillars for what Gen Space is focused on. Number one is connecting. As I mentioned, the borderless aspect of space, we feel strongly that we need to be able to help connect all the different key players or stakeholders in the space ecosystem. We also offer advisory services. So we've been working with Astropreneurs and all the other pieces of the ecosystem, parts of the ecosystems, to talk about space and giving advice. Really important is the inspirational part of what we do. Each and every member of Gen Space is totally inspired about space, and you'll hear more about that from Shreya. But we're really looking at how do we help prepare the future workforce, namely you, to become space entrepreneurs or put together businesses in space. We have a strong advisory board reaching all the continents, and we're always open to growing this list. Essentially, a great partnership of space experts in the different fields across the globe. We feel strongly that it's important to connect the stakeholders. So you're the entrepreneurs, space companies that either exist today or are scaling, large companies, government agencies, ministers that are focused on space and space technology, or just advanced technology, academic institutes across the globe, not just the space ones like the International Space University, but different universities that might have programs in space, as well as investors. We do a great job at educating investors on how to access space opportunities. We've done things in the past and are currently involved with webinars such as these, pitch competitions. We do ecosystem consulting and building across different countries or space agencies. We participate in what's called the Global Entrepreneurship Week. Typically, it's a week in November where we try to highlight all the not just entrepreneurial activities, but all the entrepreneurial activities around the globe during that week, to just give people an idea that this is going on and entrepreneurship is alive and kicking, especially in space. And then annually, we have what's called the Global Entrepreneurship Congress. This year, it's going to be in Melbourne, Australia, in the middle of September, and you're invited to that, where we invite the ecosystem builders and the ministers and the key stakeholders from around the globe to come to a meeting and share their best practices. as my last slide, I put together this squiggly path of what it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur. First and foremost, I believe strongly that as an entrepreneur, when you want to put together a business around an idea, you have to fall in love with that solution to whatever the problem is, and make sure you talk to customers. Make sure that when you go about setting your business plan, you've identified customers and you understand their needs and you can solve them with what you're doing. Then to make sure that you also have a team that you trust that can build and execute on your business plan and grow your business. And then put together whatever your product is, develop the product, demonstrate the product. And then the most important thing is, I put get FUD in here, but really sell your product, put your product out there, make it usable, make sure that your customers are using it. And ideally, as you sell your product, you're funding your company, but there are also steps that you need to take to get funding that we'll also talk through in this webinar. So with that said, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn, mention that you participated in this webinar. Be happy to chat with you and help in any manner or connect you up within the network. Thanks again, and I'll give it back to Shreya. Can you please share, and what we'll have is a dialogue, and we welcome questions as well if you put them in the chat. What excites you about opportunities that you've been involved with in space?
Hi. Okay. I think there's, for me, every day is super exciting, right? When we consider where space has been and where space is going, right? I think, first of all, the thing that has excited me the most, and what I've seen over especially the last couple of years, right, is the increasing awareness of the value of space, right? To solve really critical problems for people here on Earth, as well as the value of space as a business area, right? So we're getting more countries joining, and we know that the audience that's joining today is from many different cultures and countries. So it's really great to see that growing awareness and interest. And then for me, I'm starting to see, especially within the markets that I'm looking at, right, the growing awareness of what downstream applications can bring to the table. So when you're looking at Earth observation and AI, right, so you're combining really cutting edge tools to solve problems that have really plagued a lot of these ecosystems for a long time. I'm loving also the connection between universities, right, and the commercial space as well, which is really key, right? As we see from many other ecosystems, you look at Silicon Valley, you look at Boston, you look across Europe, right? You have this synergy between academia and the entrepreneurial space, right? So this is something that has been really key, and I'm really glad to be seeing that. The second thing is just the democratization of space to new kinds of astropreneurs, right? As you mentioned, right? So what that now means is that you're having this proliferation of a lot of different perspectives, right? One thing I always say is that problems are very local, right? But so is innovation, right? So you're gonna find that entrepreneurs in different geographical zones, right, are solving the same sort of problems in different ways, and that brings this diversity, right? So it's really interesting over the last couple of years to have seen that coming to the space sector, and they're trying super amazing new innovative things. So personally, I'm seeing space companies trying to solve SDG goals, right? So access to finance, equity, climate change, things that you wouldn't necessarily attribute to space, right? So if you look at agricultural development is one of the most powerful tools, right, to end extreme poverty, boost shared prosperity, right, and really feed 9.7 billion people by 2050. So when you see how important these solutions are, for instance, one of the companies that we're currently mentoring, right, has built an amazing platform that gives access to credit, right? So using geospatial data, right, he's able to help, I think about 50,000 farmers, right, get access to finance, because you're able to tell, right, before harvest, right, what that field is going to actually produce, right? So you're able to get access to the right sorts of funders, right? I'm really excited as well to see connectivity, right, be something that is really making a resurgence. So we're seeing a lot of satellite constellations. So, Starlink obviously being the one that is most popular. That has just launched in Nigeria as one of the first countries in Africa. It's just launched in South Africa a few days ago. And that ability to really give everyone access to connectivity, I think, is huge. And really seeing a lot of companies jumping into that. So OneWeb and others like that. So I think for me, there's a lot to celebrate. We still have a long way to go in terms of more of these kinds of ecosystems be able to join into that global space conversation. But I'm really excited about where we are right now.
Can you talk a little bit more about the access to space for small businesses? I see that there was a question in the chat about that. So how have the barriers really been reduced? You're mentioning all these cool applications.
I think that as you mentioned, Stefan, right? It's just cheaper, right? To be a space company, right? In 2023 and 2022. And the cost of getting to space has been reduced with ride sharing, where you have companies like SpaceX, right? Able to allow payloads to go into space for tens of thousands rather than tens of millions. And then you have companies that are looking more upstream, building components for nanosats. So nanosats are satellites that are much smaller than your usual satellite. Sometimes using off-the-shelf components that are easy to get access to, right? So all of this has just created this this really amazing opportunity for really smart, enterprising young entrepreneurs from anywhere in the world, right? To connect to that space opportunity and first of all build out the products, and then look at becoming a space company. One of the things I have to say though is that time and time again we see really smart people building solutions, but then I would say the biggest barrier is the business know-how, right? So you have the engineering and the technical know-how, and then a lot of people trying to figure out how do I create that and make that into a business. And that's really why we have these accelerators, like the European Institute of Sustainability and Innovations accelerator, and many more, right? Like GenSpace has been working with. So I think that that's definitely something that has been a barrier, because there's a lot of there's a lack of knowledge, right, from the business perspective sometimes, but then that's easily overcome. Sometimes supply chains can be a bit of a barrier as well, especially in emerging markets like Africa. But we're really seeing these, as we go along, we're seeing a lot of these being eroded, and through partnerships, through intergovernmental type initiatives, right? These things are being worked on.
If you were to pick one amazing thing that's going on, or the most impactful product that's going on in space, what would that be, Shreya?
So I'm super excited about doing things in new ways, right? I think I've always been this sort of like innovation focused manager, and so I'm always pressing my startups to sort of look at different ways to do what they're doing, while still keeping your feet on the ground in a way, right? But I think a lot of the progress that we've seen over the last decade, 15 years, has really been through those crazy people, crazy entrepreneurs who have dared to push the boundaries, as really only the private sector can do. And I think that that has to accelerate and continue. So for me, like companies like Spin Launch, right, are on my radar for a different way of getting payloads into space, right? So I think that I'm not always so I guess I don't hamper on a lot about climate change, right? It's very important for me, but it's not something that I've always put at the top. But I think that as airlines look into what they can do to sort of reduce emissions, I think rockets, right, are also an area. I know Elon Musk has mentioned that as well, right? But basically, we're using what we have. So I think companies like Spin Launch that get to sort of spin these payloads, right, hundreds of times and then launch them into space. I think these kinds of solutions really super excite me. I'm also excited about companies that are focused on things like space-based solar power. It's very early days. There's a lot of challenges to solve in that area before we can get to anything that is an MVP. But then certain governments are starting to really focus on it. So the UK's innovation center has sort of put some money towards that, towards really pushing more people in that direction. I'm really excited about PNT, right? So really precise versions of GPS that really are critical, right, for the future of where we see society. So when you talk about self-driving cars, right, you're going to need something a lot more precise, right, than some of the current systems that we have today. For a lot of the IoT type solutions, you're really going to need a lot more precision as well. So it's super interesting to see what is coming out of that space. And for me, last of all, I'm excited about the combination of the metaverse. I know that isn't a 2023 word, right? That was a 2022. All the buzz was 2022, and now it's all generative AI. But I think there's a combination of the metaverse, of geospatial data, and AI that's doing amazing things, allowing cities like New York, right, to map out the entire city, understand how different systems will work together, understand the flow of traffic, right? Really simulates a lot of amazing things in real time. So I think space is becoming something that is invisibly behind a lot of well, I would say behind a lot of the new solutions that are coming. And I think that's always a good thing for technology, right? Instead of using the buzzwords and saying, oh, blockchain or the metaverse, or it's just, where it gets to that point where it's just ingrained in tech, in the solutions and providing value. I think that's where we're going with space now.
From your global perspective, how do you feel governments should get involved with supporting space startups? Do you have anything you can share maybe from the Africa perspective?
I think that governments have one of the biggest roles to play. There's no escaping it. When I first started, I was really focused on bottom-up innovation, which is basically to say that you sort of don't look as much at what the government is doing, and you try to catalyze from the bottom. You try to get the ecosystem together, try to catalyze community, and then push things up so that at some point, right, when there's more value, the government says, "Oh wow, there's value in this thing. Let's support it," right? And I think that's sort of the way that it's sort of been happening on the African continent, but I would say that over the last year and a half, there's been a lot of interest from African governments. A lot more countries are putting satellites into space. I think people are just understanding, like, that the sovereignty of national data from space is super important, right? So whether you're tracking, resources like oil, mining resources, security, people, whatever it is, right? These things play best when it's coming from space. So I think there's that push. And I think that governments are always going to come from what I say, not a selfish interest, but you have to find that midway, right? You have to find that value proposition, right, as a governmental body, for why space really matters to your country or to your ecosystem. So I think that in Europe, in the UK, there's also been a push, especially in the last year. In the last couple of years, there were the business incubation centers that were set up across the UK and Europe, where these were primarily just built, right, to sort of connect enterprising startups, right, that didn't have access to very cutting edge technology and know-how, with universities and academia that did have access to that know-how and that research, right? And so just erasing that barrier, right? And it's been quite successful. So I think we need to do more of those in emerging markets as well. And then, going back to Silicon Valley, right? I would say that, in terms of, the way that Silicon Valley grew, right, from a semiconductor starting point, right, which was really heavily supported by government, right? That kind of growth, I think, is very important, because in the end, what keeps this as a self-sustaining entity, right, is really that ecosystem. So government plays that first role with grants, with setting the space policy and what the country wants to focus on as its own areas of value, and then the ecosystem and the private sector then have that chance to really run with it. So incredibly important area for many governments.
And one of the things we do at GenSpace is we spend time educating investors, because investors don't even realize that they can invest in space. Historically, it's been a billionaire's investment model. So we spend a lot of time talking to just the angel investors and smaller scale investors that they can get involved with space opportunities. Shay, you were involved with the NASA Space Apps Challenge. I think that was a pretty cool program. Can you share a little bit more about that?
I think that it can be overstated, the importance these kinds of initiatives have on ecosystems. I think a lot of especially in the emerging markets, right, especially for countries that are not currently as advanced as, say, maybe in Asia or the US, say within South America and other areas, not just Africa. I would say these kinds of initiatives build the ingredients, right? Because when I first started, when I introduced space apps into Nigeria and a couple of countries in West Africa a couple of years ago, or close to a decade ago, the thinking behind that was to say that we do have space professionals, right, who've come out of the country, but a lot of them don't have any projects really to work on. There's no sort of, direction again from which is the role of the government, where you're setting the policy for the entire country, right? So you didn't have that framework, right, for a lot of them to jump into. So you then found that most of the talent, right, was from the generalized tech ecosystem, right? So you have engineers, you have software designers, you have, you have business people, and so the thinking was to take all of these ingredients, right, and their enthusiasm for space, right, and really put them, to task around, moonshot type sort of thinking and solutions. And I think the first step to that was really the Space Apps program. And the Space Apps program is, I believe, the largest hackathon on Earth till date, right? I think you have, every major country and ecosystem participating in some way. And it's really great to have NASA sort of set an agenda, right, that helps each of these ecosystems see what is really important. So whether it's food in space and keeping, astronauts fed, on long, deep spacefaring journeys, right? Whether it's now the focus on, lunar outposts, right, which is a very serious thing, right? Whether it's looking at Mars, right, which was the focus a couple of years ago, whether it's looking at, energy and building, grids, right, on any one of these planets, right? All of these different things, right, or whether it's looking at spacesuits, right, from a different perspective. So all of these different kinds of thinking were the kinds of things that the Space Apps Hackathon really put on the radar for a lot of space enthusiasts, space professionals, and I think that's incredibly important, right? It's a start for every ecosystem.
Great, thanks. There's a question from Yusuf about hobby rocket modeling businesses. So maybe to answer that, Yusuf, the best thing to do is, depending on what part of hobby rocket modeling you want to get involved with, is understand, talk to customers, see what's missing, and see what you're passionate about, how you might want to solve that problem, if there's a problem that you can solve, or find team members that can solve it with you. And it looks like you're also asking about different types of communications technologies and simulations. So yeah, that's part of being an entrepreneur, is taking a look at whatever opportunity there is for you to create a business, to solve a problem, to then become successful in terms of revenue generation.
Yeah. One thing I would say is, whenever you're building a business around, maybe you have a really great idea, I think one of the good filters is to ask, can this be done any other way, right? So you want to be careful not to do space for space. I don't know if that makes sense. So not doing space just because it's cool, right? So it's about, is this business going to create value using space technology, right? And this came from one of my conversations with someone who helped sort of grow one of the early entrepreneurs within the Colorado space ecosystem. So, one of the things he was saying was, a lot of the early startups that came up at that time, right, were really looking at, how do we build things that, that space really gives an edge to, right? And those were the guys who were most successful, right? And some people built, just like a hinge, right, that helped, like, solar panels unfold more easily, right, from satellites, which coincidentally was a huge problem, right? Because I believe, you had to sort of like have a little small explosion, on each panel, just to like let it out, right, before that. So this was, obviously a lot more efficient, a lot more, and that company did really, really well. So, it could be really little things, it could be really big things like a SpaceX, right? But, is it providing value? Is it something that where space is bringing something unique to the table, right? Because space can be hard as well.
Great, thanks. We have a couple minutes left, and I just want to urge folks to put questions in the chat if you have any. As we're kind of wrapping up our side, Shreya, what advice would you give the audience on if they want to get involved in a career in space? What should they do?
I'll say it's just do a lot of research. Put your fillers out there. There are a lot of programs right now that are allowing you to, as a non-space professional, as a space enthusiast, right, allowing you to sort of get like a soft entry into the space. And as I mentioned, we've done a lot with the European Institute of Innovation and Sustainability, and that's a good example of a program that was put together, and it was a really good balance between space professionals as well as people who were experts in other areas. And they came together to sort of form companies, right? Go through a sort of training program, right? And then at the end, they had to go through sort of like an accelerator program. So they came up with ideas, and then they had to come up with MVPs from a high level. And that really brought these people together as real space entrepreneurs, even people who weren't entrepreneurs before that. And some of these teams after the program have actually gone on to incorporate their companies, and they're building out their products, right? I would say also use Google Alerts. I use that a lot. That's a very simple way to sort of get notified on any programs, any jobs, any academic type courses that are out there around space, especially for beginners. So a Google Alert just allows you to set like a couple of keywords that are most important for what you're looking for. And, I have all sorts of things, coming my way without having to go out there and search for it in particular. And then also network, right? I have a lot of people come to me talking about, how do I get into space? And so through my networks, through Stefan's networks, through GenSpace as a whole, there are a lot of people who are in the industry and who have connections to companies that potentially are looking to hire. So yeah, I think really play on and leverage your network. So actively build that through LinkedIn, through networks like Stefan's, keeping in touch with GenSpace as well.
Just to pull in two more comments from the chat. So Zoltan offered a way to connect and is interested in connecting. So, and that's really the genesis of GenSpace is connecting all the different stakeholders universally that are involved with doing business in space. So I think it's really important to collaborate. A competitive nature is important, but I think collaboration is even more important because we have to all succeed in space. And then there also was a question from James about who James should contact about getting funding. Shreya, what's your perspective on how do you get funded as a space company?
I think that, globally, people want to put money towards things that they think have value and can scale, right? So I think if you're able to tell that story well with whatever kind of pitch deck that you put together, I think that's a very important first step. We currently have a couple of startups within some of the cohorts that I'm part of that are looking to that are in that stage as well. And it's all focused on the pitch and the value proposition right now. And I know, Stefan, you and I jumped on a call with a company in New Zealand a couple of weeks ago that was looking at, how do we position ourselves, right? We're about to go, I think they were trying to raise about 2.1, and, they're looking at, how do we tell the story in the best way, right? To get the right sort of, not just any funding, right, but get the right sort of funding. I think that for me is the first thing, right? And then I would say, just like what they did, right? Reaching out to us, it's about leveraging your networks as well, right? Because it's a lot easier sometimes to grow through people who know other people, right? This is like with many other things, right? So I could potentially, say, hey, I know these guys, they're doing really great work. Jump in a call with them and see if this is of value. And this is what I've been doing with some of the VCs that I know, right? After that talk, I was able to then say to these guys, hey, I think this has real value. Jump in a call with them. And then the rest is up to the startup. But I think it's A, telling the right story, fine-tuning that, and B, leverage your networks to get your foot into the door.
I'm totally with you, Shreya. I mean, it's really about storytelling. It's about, as I mentioned, you want to fall in love with what you're doing and then be able to share that love and get people excited about it. And as I stressed, Astropreneurship is about building businesses. So businesses ultimately have to have some return, not just to the business, but also if you're getting investment to the investors. There's different ways of getting investment from government organizations for grants. It's a longer process, but that's also a good way to start. So I think we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I just wanted to offer for you, Shreya, any closing comments you'd like to make to the group?
I'll just say that never give up on your passion and your enthusiasm for space. I think that's how the entire space sector grew, right? And it was really from the passion of people who wouldn't say no to the impossibilities of space, right? So now that humanity is becoming a space-faring civilization, there's no turning back, right? It really is true that space is a location for business, right? And so don't wait for other people to show you what's possible. Push those boundaries yourself.
I love it. And almost 60 years ago, when I got inspired by Apollo 11, this never occurred to me. It never thought it'd be a possibility. So reach for the stars. So that's what I can say. With that, Alice, I'd like to pass it to you, and thank you, George and Alice, for the opportunity.
A massive thank you to you both for covering such an incredible topic today. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. There's a lot of great questions in the chat about where do I start with business plans and funding? And I implore all of you to get in contact with Stefan and start talking to the Gen Network and see how they can help you build your ideas and your foundation for a new business plan as you move forward. On behalf of Spaceport America, I want to say a massive thank you for you all joining today. As we mentioned before, this is really an introductory session for you to start utilizing Spaceport America, but also the Global Spaceport Alliance to contact your local spaceports and get connected to them throughout the world, because that's really the way we're going to build the future workforce that's going to create all these incredible changes in aerospace in the coming years. George, would you like to close up the session today?
Thanks, Alice, and thanks, Stefan and Shay. Great presentation. For those who might have missed the beginning or who weren't able to be on the call today, we are going to make the recording available, and we will put out a reminder to folks, but don't forget there are additional topics coming up in the weeks ahead, including on April 1st, resume building, an excellent skill to have, whether you're going to be an individual entrepreneur or part of a larger space team. So thanks to all for listening in and participating today, and hope to see you again in the future.